The first time I saw his shoes outside her door, they were a perfectly polished pair of Italian leather loafers. They should have been a clue. Instead, they were the first nail in the coffin of my marriage. The neighborhood of Willow Creek was the kind of place people bought into for permanence. Manicured lawns, two-story houses with Federalist-style columns, and the quiet assurance of suburban prosperity. For me, Ethan Miller, it represented the life I built for Victoria, my wife of 9 years. I worked the long hours, the software architecture deadlines, the transatlantic conference calls, to ensure her days were filled with the simple luxury of choice. She chose to manage the home, join the garden club, and, as it turned out, grow very close to our next-door neighbor, Rob Sterling. Rob was everything I was not. A stay-at-home freelance photographer, annoyingly handsome in a rustic, perpetually 5 o'clock shadow way and always available. He was the kind of man who'd offer to help fix a sputtering sprinkler head at 2 p.m. on a Tuesday, while I was stuck on a video call discussing server uptime in Singapore. The subtle shifts started quietly, like water damage behind a painted wall. Victoria began leaving her phone face down, a cardinal sin for a woman who once used her text tone as her primary way of communicating. She'd take longer to get ready for our rare date nights, a process I initially took as a compliment, only to realize the effort was for herself, a new vibrancy that felt pointedly not for me. Her scent changed too, less of the classic French perfume I gifted her and more of a light, woodsy, almost masculine soap. The Italian loafers outside Rob's door was the first piece of concrete evidence, found during a late Friday afternoon when I'd skipped an early flight to surprise her. I pulled into the driveway, pleased with my own spontaneity, and immediately noticed the empty space in Rob's drive. He must be out, I thought. Then, as I walked past his front porch to get to my own front door, I saw them, the shoes neatly tucked beside a decorative clay pot, right outside our home's guest entrance, the one Victoria sometimes used for quick access to the garage. They were exactly the kind of expensive, slightly flashy footwear Rob wore. The sight hit me with an unsettling certainty, a premonition more visceral than a mere guess. I walked past them, unlocked our door, and found Victoria humming in the kitchen, casually arranging a vase of freshly cut hydrangeas. "Ethan, you're home early. Your flight was supposed to be tonight," she exclaimed, her hand flying to her chest in a practiced show of surprise. Her face, however, was a little too pale, her smile a little too wide. "They swapped my flights." "Finished the presentation early," I replied, my voice sounding hollow even to my own ears. "I didn't mention the shoes." The confrontation felt too soon, too explosive. I was a man of logic and process. I needed data. For the next 2 weeks, I became a ghost in my own house, a quiet observer collecting intelligence. I checked her phone while she was in the shower, but it was locked with a new, complex passcode. I drove by the house during work hours and saw Rob's truck parked 2 streets over, often followed by Victoria's sedan missing from our own driveway. They were being careful, almost professional. The sheer calculation of their betrayal was a deeper wound than the act itself. The night the truth shattered the illusion completely, it was a sound, not a sight, that did it. I was in my home office late, reviewing contracts, when I heard a faint, distinct creak from the attic access panel above our shared bedroom. I froze. It was a sound that only occurred if someone was climbing in or out of the crawl space above the garage, a space that bordered Rob's property line. I walked silently to the bedroom door, slipped out and moved to the back of the house, toward the master bathroom window that overlooked the small gap between our homes. I didn't go through the house. I went outside. I circled the side lawn, crouched low, and moved to the back fence like a commando. As I rounded the corner, I saw it. The old, shaky wooden ladder that had been stored in my own garage for years, now propped up against the wall of Rob's house. The top rung was right beside his second-floor bathroom window, the same window that abutted our attic crawl space. And then I saw the man himself, Rob, wearing only a pair of sweatpants. His hair damp and slightly disheveled, was descending the ladder, his muscles straining as he gripped the rungs. He reached the bottom, pulled the ladder down with a practiced ease, and looked around furtively before dragging it into his own side yard. He didn't see me, lurking in the deep shadow of the towering oak tree. I stood there, the cool night air biting at my exposed forearms, the image of him climbing down from a window that led into my home, from a space my wife had just been in, burning itself into my memory. It wasn't the passionate, reckless cheating of movies. It was calculated, routine, and profoundly disrespectful. They were using the physical connection of the houses, the shared boundaries of our properties, to enable their secret. The physical act of betrayal was bad, but the engineering of the lie, the sheer audacity of using a ladder to sneak between houses, treating my house like a hotel, was what cracked my self-control. I returned to the house, but not through the back door. I walked to the kitchen, found a small heavy wrench I kept in a drawer for sink repairs, and returned to my car. I drove 2 blocks away, parked, and took a deep, shuddering breath. I didn't want to confront her in a rage I couldn't control. I wanted clarity, and I wanted it on my own terms. I opened the trunk, took out the wrench, and walked back to the house. I walked up to the living room window, the large decorative pane that faced the street, the one that perfectly framed the facade of the happy home we presented to the world. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I just lifted the wrench and smashed the glass. The noise was deafening, a sickening crunch that shattered the silence of Willow Creek. The entire house lights up instantly. Victoria's voice, high and panicked, screamed from inside, "Ethan!" "What was that?" "Rob, is that you?" "Rob." I stood there, the glass shards glinting on the well-maintained lawn, the wrench heavy in my hand. My heart was not racing with anger. It was cold with a final, chilling resolve. The simple fact that her first thought was to call out his name instead of mine was the last piece of data I needed. I calmly dropped the wrench, pulled my phone, and called the police, reporting a break-in attempt. Then I dialed Victoria. When she picked up, her voice was still shaking. "Ethan, the window." "What's happening?" "It's over, Victoria," I said, my voice steady, professional, like I was terminating a poorly performing contract. "I saw the shoes, the car, and I just saw the ladder." "The police are coming." "I'm going to file for divorce tomorrow. I want you out by the end of the week." The line went silent for a beat. I could hear the sirens already, a distant wailing prelude to the coming storm. "No, Ethan. No, please. Wait," she finally whispered, the panic in her voice quickly dissolving into a pathetic, desperate whine. "I can explain. It was a mistake. We can fix this. Please don't do this to us. It was a stupid mistake. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." "Save the performance," I cut her off. "The glass is shattered. There's no fixing a broken window, Victoria. All you can do is clean up the mess. And that mess is all yours." I hung up, waited for the flashing red and blue lights to bathe the wreckage of my marriage, and prepared for the battle I knew was just beginning. This was no longer about pain. It was about precision. And I was an engineer of systems. I was going to dismantle hers piece by piece. The hours immediately following the broken window were a masterclass in controlled chaos. The police arrived, and Ethan, his demeanor chillingly calm, delivered a statement about a suspicious figure he saw running toward the backyards, intentionally omitting the specific detail of the ladder and Rob. He was building his case not in a fit of rage, but in the structured silence of legal strategy. Victoria, still pale and stammering, played the role of the terrified victim, but her eyes kept darting toward Rob's house next door, a telltale sign that only solidified Ethan's resolve. The officer took the report and left, advising Ethan to board up the window and get some rest. As the first streaks of dawn bled into the sky, Ethan ignored the broken glass and the chill in the air. He didn't sleep. He sat at the kitchen table, which was ironically the last place they had shared a moment of genuine, unsuspecting connection, and began making calls. His first call was to a divorce attorney, a highly recommended specialist named Ms. Lena Sharma, who promised discretion and, more importantly, results. Ms. Sharma's first piece of advice was simple. Do not leave the marital home. Do not discuss the affair, and do not make any major financial changes that could be viewed as punitive. Ethan listened to the cold, rational logic of the law, realizing that his emotions were irrelevant to the court. Only leverage mattered. He then called a locksmith and an electrician. The locksmith changed all the house's exterior locks and, critically, installed a high-definition security camera system covering all ingress points, with a specific, tight focus on the shared boundary with Rob's property. The electrician, under the guise of installing smart lighting, rerouted the home network, granting Ethan exclusive, unlogged access to all home statements, emails, and shared cloud services. He didn't want to spy on Victoria. He wanted to secure the digital assets and ensure she couldn't erase evidence of a life lived on joint funds. When Victoria finally emerged, hours later, she looked ravaged. The fear had curdled into a desperate sorrow. She spotted Ethan at the kitchen table, working on his laptop, completely oblivious to her presence. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice husky. He looked up slowly, his face devoid of expression. "Victoria, I've been waiting for you to wake up." She rushed to him, trying to grab his hands, but he pulled them back instantly. "Please don't touch me. Let's talk about logistics." "Logistics?" "Ethan, listen to me. I made a terrible, awful mistake," she sobbed, tears streaming down her face. She dropped to her knees beside his chair, an entirely unconvincing performance that bordered on parody. "It was just a few times. It meant nothing. It was loneliness. You're never here. Rob was just there. It was a lapse in judgment. I swear I will never speak to him again. I love you, Ethan. I love us. Please forgive me. Don't throw away 9 years because of a stupid mistake. I'm begging you. I'm so sorry, truly sorry." She clung to his leg, her tears wetting the denim of his trousers. The scene was precisely what he'd expected. The predictable cocktail of self-pity, blame-shifting, and desperate pleas. Ethan remained still, a rock in the center of her emotional storm. "Stand up, Victoria. You don't have to grovel. I am not changing my mind, but I'm apologizing." "What more do you want?" she cried, her voice rising in genuine distress, realizing her theatrical plea wasn't working. "I want the truth, which you're incapable of giving, and I want a clean separation, which you're making difficult," Ethan stated, his voice a low, steady monotone that cut through her hysterics better than any shout could have. "It wasn't a mistake. It was a pattern. You used my home, my resources, and my absence to maintain a system of betrayal. That's not a lapse, Victoria. That's a choice. I have already contacted an attorney. The papers will be ready soon." He finally stood, forcing her to scramble up. "You have until the end of the week to pack the clothes and personal items you will need for the short term. I've transferred half of the cash accounts into a new joint account you will have access to for the next 30 days. Beyond that, the lawyers will handle everything. You can move in with your mother, or perhaps with Rob, given his availability." The mention of Rob's name hit her like a physical blow. The crying stopped instantly, replaced by a flash of pure, ugly resentment. "You're punishing me. You're being cruel. After everything, this is how you treat me? I'm treating you with the clarity you deserve," Ethan countered, his eyes hard. "You chose the method of disclosure when you chose Rob. I simply chose the consequence. Now, if you want a clean, quiet divorce, you will cooperate. If you fight me, I will use every piece of evidence I have to ensure you regret ever seeing him." This marked the end of the negotiation. Victoria, realizing she was dealing with a different man, one who had swapped vulnerability for steel, retreated. She spent the rest of the day on her phone in the guest room, probably texting Rob, trying to figure out their next move. Ethan, meanwhile, moved onto the second phase of his plan, the collateral damage. He knew Rob Sterling was a man whose entire facade was built on a curated image. The successful, sensitive photographer, the friendly, helpful neighbor, the emotionally available partner. He had a wife, Sarah, who was rarely seen but whose existence was a known part of Rob's stable image. Ethan decided that Rob and Victoria's quiet, calculated affair deserved a loud, public dissolution. He didn't call Sarah immediately. Instead, he worked. Leveraging his expertise in data architecture, he started building a digital narrative. He recovered old photos from Victoria's cloud storage, photos of the Italian loafers taken casually on her own phone, background shots revealing Rob's distinct patio furniture, and, most damningly, a few short, time-stamped video clips from the new security camera showing Rob's truck parking 2 streets over, followed by a wide-angle shot of him walking from the direction of the property line minutes before Victoria's car disappeared. He compiled everything into a single, encrypted file, neatly categorized and cross-referenced with dates and times. It was a dossier of destruction. The final piece of his setup came that evening. He ordered a large, brightly colored moving container to be delivered first thing Monday morning. He didn't order the subtle white kind. He ordered the largest, most vibrant blue one available. He had it placed conspicuously right on the edge of the driveway, perfectly positioned to be visible from every home on the street, especially Rob's window. When Victoria saw the monstrous blue container arrive, her composure finally broke entirely. She ran out of the house, clutching a robe to her chest, her face a mask of humiliation. "What is this, Ethan? Are you trying to make a spectacle of me?" "The whole neighborhood can see this," she shrieked, Ethan was standing in the doorway, drinking his morning coffee, the smell of fresh coffee mixing with the metallic scent of the rental truck. The spectacle, Victoria, was your making. This is merely a logistical necessity, he replied, taking a slow sip. It's for your belongings. I'm going to need the guest room back for my home office by Tuesday, so I'd suggest you start packing. He watched her, the distraught wife, standing beside a giant, unmistakable blue sign announcing the collapse of her marriage to the entire community. It was the public shame he knew she feared most. That morning, as Rob Sterling looked out his window at the giant blue container, he saw not just a moving box, but a warning. And it was time for Ethan to deliver the second warning, directly to the collateral damage, Sarah Sterling. He picked up the phone, the file name Sterling Evidence Final flashing on his screen. The time for controlled logic was over. It was time for calculated exposure. Ethan held the phone, the digital glow of the contact name, Sarah Sterling, harsh against his palm. He took one deep breath and pressed the call button. The conversation was short, brutally efficient, and devoid of the emotional drama Victoria had tried to weaponize. Hello, Sarah. My name is Ethan Miller. I live next door. I apologize for calling you, but I need to inform you that your husband, Rob, has been having an affair with my wife, Victoria. I have evidence and I've filed for divorce. I believe you should know everything before it becomes public knowledge. Sarah's voice was initially guarded, then disbelieving, and finally, chillingly flat. She didn't cry. She asked questions, precise, logical questions about dates, times, and locations. She, too, was a woman of process. Ethan explained the shared boundary, the ladder, the coded messages. He offered to send the compiled dossier. Send it, she said, her voice a wire of contained fury. And thank you, Mr. Miller, for the clarity. The exchange was the final critical step in Ethan's plan, decoupling the collateral damage. He had ensured that when the inevitable neighborhood explosion occurred, Rob would face his wife's informed wrath, not just Victoria's desperate defense. The climax of the divorce proceedings was set for a Friday, a day Ethan chose for maximum impact on the neighborhood's routine. Victoria, having moved into a temporary rental and hired her own lawyer, was furious but cowed. Her lawyer advised her to keep a low profile and minimize conflict, especially after Ethan's attorney had already presented the initial evidence. The revenge, however, was not intended solely for the courtroom. It was for Willow Creek. That Friday morning, Ethan arrived home from his lawyer's office to find a moving crew already working on Rob Sterling's house next door. Not the giant blue container of his design, but a sleek, professional black truck, Sarah's choice. Sarah was standing on her lawn, coordinating the movers with the same cold, quiet efficiency that Ethan himself had adopted. She glanced over and gave him a curt nod. The message was clear. His clarity had given her agency. Victoria, meanwhile, had been trying to stage a final dramatic appeal. She showed up at Ethan's house unannounced, slipping past the security gates with an old code. She found Ethan in the living room, calmly supervising the boarding up of the broken window, sealing the wound she had created. "Ethan, you have to stop this," she pleaded, her voice trembling but now carrying a sharp edge of genuine fear. She saw the movers next door. "You've destroyed my reputation. You've ruined Rob's life, and now Sarah is leaving him. Are you happy? Do you feel satisfied?" Ethan paused, turning to face her. "I am neither happy nor satisfied, Victoria. I am finished." He walked toward her, not in anger, but with the measured steps of a man delivering a verdict. "You asked me to forgive a stupid mistake, but that mistake created a system of lies. I'm a systems engineer. When a system is compromised at its core, you don't patch it. You dismantle it. My actions are not revenge. They are consequences. You wanted discretion. You should have been discreet. You wanted to cry for forgiveness. You should have cried before I found the evidence. Not when I found the lawyers." She burst into fresh, wrenching sobs, the tears this time seeming truly authentic, born from the total collapse of her cushioned life. "Please, I will do anything. I'll go to therapy. I'll get a job. Just take me back. I can't be alone. I'm scared. I need you. I truly regret it." She was on her knees again, grasping for his hand. Ethan looked down at her, the sight of her genuine desperation finally landing. It was a fleeting, hollow victory. "Regret is for your conscience, Victoria, not for my marriage. You needed a man who was always there. You needed availability. You got Rob. I'm a man who builds structures, and you tore mine down. My new structure won't have your foundation in it. He gently removed her hands from his arm. Your lawyer knows the terms. I've signed the final offer. It's fair, but it is final. Please leave the house now. I have work to do. As Victoria walked out, clutching her purse and her rapidly dissolving sense of security, she saw Rob across the street arguing with Sarah, his face a mask of pleading and confusion. Then she looked back at the large blue container in her former driveway, a monument to her exposure, and the broken window, now neatly, brutally boarded up. Ethan watched her go, a quiet sense of closure settling over him. He wasn't fueled by rage anymore, but by the cold, clean logic of a problem solved. The system was broken. The old component had been ejected. The new security protocols were in place. 2 weeks later, the divorce was finalized, and Rob Sterling sold his house in a hurry, leaving Willow Creek just as quietly and suddenly as his affair had begun. Ethan stood on his newly quiet, glass-free lawn, watching the final moving truck pull away from the Sterling house. The neighborhood was quiet again, but the undercurrent of gossip was heavy. And for the first time in months, Ethan didn't care. He had lost a wife, a friend, and a vision of his future, but he had reclaimed his self-respect and the quiet authority of his life. He walked back inside his house, now fully his, where the new alarm system offered a comforting metallic click. The silence was deep, cold, and utterly free of lies. He was finished. The system was clean.